I'm Rohan. Firstly, thank you for the introduction. I am currently product lead at Meta. In the past, I've worked at Yelp and Yahoo, and also tried to start my own company that didn't work out. I'm going to be talking about going from 0 to 100 users. You can use my framework for starting a new product or a feature. In the next 15 minutes, you'll learn about a simple framework to increase your odds of building successful new products. I'll give you a template to use and links to other great resources. Building a new product is very hard. And I know that firsthand because I've failed at several of them. I'll share my mistakes so that you can skip past those. What I don't know how to do is find PMF. I don't believe there's one fixed way to do that. And even if there is, I don't know it. I will give you a tried and tested process to test if you're getting closer to PMF. During undergrad, I found myself in the middle of my startup called Find a Way. We were on a mission to build a new incentive model for education-focused nonprofits to raise capital. But we were stuck in cycles of decision-making and pivots without validating a problem or understanding our users. We went from a loyalty card program to a crowdfunding solution. Looking back, it's clear we struggled to prioritize our problems because we didn't really grasp our audience's needs. We just thought we did. And this experience made me realize that great products aren't a result of stumbling on an insight. You need to be intentional. Building a new product is about adding zeros. Where you start with yourself, then you add another 0 to 10 users, another 1 to 100, and eventually all the way to the world. Today, we're talking about a small part of this journey from 0 to 100. And I have a framework to help you do that, Chad. My framework is grounded in 2 principles. One, a repeatable process is better than an idea. A process is reliable and consistent. It can be scaled, and it enables you to have predictable outcomes. A singular idea is a hit or miss. And second, do things that don't scale. You've probably already heard this a million times. Let me reinforce this idea. Doing things that don't scale allows you to quickly test several ideas, and the feedback loop is quicker. So you can go from yourself to building with 10 users to all the way to 100 early adopters. Let's dig into each of these steps, starting with you. At this point, you have a problem that you're excited about, but what you need is conviction for it. You want to exit with a problem that you have conviction for. You do not have conviction right now, and for good reason. You shouldn't have it till others tell you that they've also experienced this problem. You don't need to build anything yet. In fact, you shouldn't build anything yet. Let's take an example. Let's say you're a homeowner. You just tried to get your home insulated. This experience made you realize that working with a home insulation contractor is a very frustrating experience where you have to schedule with multiple people, try to get multiple quotes, let these people into your home. And this takes a lot of time. You talk to a couple of your friends, it makes you realize that their experience has been similar. Now, you wonder if there's a startup opportunity here. What do? Do you start writing code? No, because you're here, you do not write a code. You do not write code. You write a hypothesis. And this is where hypothesis-driven iteration comes in. This process helps with systematic testing. You begin with testable predictions about user behavior or market needs. This encourages small tests. Instead of large, costly launches, you can test small changes to see their impact. And it helps you in saving time and resources by focusing on what needs validation without over-investing in unproven ideas. There are 6 key elements to this framework. And I have a template where I maintain a running list of ideas and hypotheses that I'm always working on. I have that linked at the bottom. Now let's dive into each one of them. Starting with hypothesis. This is a prediction of what you believe to be true. Always start with this. Be opinionated. I like to start my hypothesis with we believe that. In this insulation example, we believe that people want to insulate their homes. We believe that people who want to insulate their homes are having a tough time because they have to deal with too much back and forth with the contractor and have to let them in their homes just to get a quote. There are several ways to write a hypothesis. I like to use this one. There's another one that I've linked in the bottom of the slide, which is a lightweight JTPD framework, which I use every now and then. Behind your hypothesis are beliefs. These are the beliefs. Testing your beliefs can bridge the gap between excitement and conviction. People often make several assumptions without realizing that they're making them, with the big one being that others have also faced this problem. There are three beliefs that I see in this particular insulation example. One, that back and forth and scheduling a visit are problems that others have faced as well. Second, this impacts decision-making. The frustration is big enough that consumer decision-making is impacted by this. It could be a big problem, but if people don't care, it doesn't matter. And third, contractor challenges. Contractors also find the lead qualification process time-consuming. What if contractors don't find it painful? What if contractors want to go to someone's house because it's a hard sell tactic? This helps them close the lead. If any of these three beliefs are not true, your hypothesis will not hold. Now that you have a hypothesis and you've written down your beliefs, you move on to your wedge audience. This is a comically narrow audience that you want to build the first product for. You center your hypothesis, problem, and your first solution around this audience. Here, because you face this problem, you wonder if other people similar to you have also faced this problem, and your wedge audience becomes homeowners who are motivated to insulate their homes for energy savings in large US cities with cold climates. I've linked a really good resource about finding our initial audience by Lenny Ratchetsky in the bottom of the slide. You should check that out. Now, with the hypothesis, beliefs, and wedge audience in mind, you move on to documenting everything you know. This is your opportunity to gut check how big this problem is that you're chasing. All problems aren't worth solving, or they can't be solved profitably. You need to answer two questions here. Is the opportunity big enough? And why now? Here, you need to check if home insulation is growing. Are more contractors getting trained on insulation jobs? And from a why now perspective, government has just announced rebates, which might accelerate adoption. These three things make it a really lucrative opportunity for you to dig into this further. So you do just that. You define an exit criteria. This criteria is what will give you conviction. I like to define these upfront so that I'm not biased. Upfront before I graduate from one step to the other, adding zeros. Here you will have conviction when 5 consumers tell you that they've experienced this problem, and 5 contractors also tell you that lead qualification is a time sink for them. And finally, test design. This helps you get to the exit criteria. Again, you do not need to build anything yet. You need to talk to people, get access to experts, or scout the internet. You could do qualitative interviews with 5 consumers and contractors here, or call 5 additional contractors pretending to be a customer looking for a quote. And this is how you use hypothesis-driven iteration to kickstart your work for building a product for home insulation contractors. Now, once you have a problem with conviction, you're ready to add another zero and go on to the next step, which I like to call generous partners. At the beginning of this phase, you have a problem that you have conviction for, but you have no solution. You're trying to build a solution that 10 users absolutely love. You begin with idea generation, recruiting users from your wedge audience, and start building a product that 10 of them absolutely love. Remember, you're only building for 10 wedge users. These users might have customized needs that scalable solutions can't meet, and you don't have the luxury of thinking about at this moment. This process will also help you realize if your audience segmentation is accurate. You don't care about scale, distribution, or the future. All you care about is 10 users. And you're still doing things that don't scale. You're not building a robust, complete product. This enables you to build a faster feedback loop and test ideas more quickly. When I joined new product experimentation last year, Meta's incubator, I began working on Super, which was an intimate live streaming platform for super fans. We quickly realized that we needed to pivot. We brainstormed on several directions and decided that lowering the barrier for hosting live streams was a meaningful opportunity. Despite of being at a company of Meta size, we recruited 10 creators and basically became their production team. We shadowed them, got on calls with them to resolve issues. We spent months on this till we landed a solution that worked perfectly for them. We were manually editing streams for creators so they could post reels on their channels. We were building pre-built events and templates so that these creators could host behind-the-scenes live streams, could host trivia for their live streams. We were focusing on extremely niche users within a set of very extremely niche use cases. Only when we were confident that we had built a product for these 10 creators and they were coming back again and again and they were happy with this, we decided to move on to the next step, open the product up and add another 0 and move on to early adopters. At this phase, we had a solution that 10 users loved, but we were focused on evolving our existing solution. We were still focused on things that don't scale. However, we were beginning to build a more robust product. Everything couldn't still be manual. Users were beginning to ask for things beyond the core offering. We were still observing and over-indexing on every single user. We talked to everyone who used the product. We talked to every single one who failed, every single user who was successful. After we decided to open the product up to early adopters, and nailing the product for a certain segment of creators, new and different type of creators started to enter the product. Different use cases started to emerge, and people started to ask for more table stake features such as comment filtering during a live stream. Now we couldn't get on a call with every single one of them. There were just too many. We were a small team. We decided to add customer support on the website, support chat on websites to help creators sign up and during the event. We were still a small team, but we were still all acting as a support team. However, the journey of adding zeros is non-linear. Sometimes you grow from 1 to 100 and zoom past that. Other times you grow from 0 to 10, 10 to 100, then all the way back. And for us, we decided to end that experiment called Super. But what was important was that we learned and applied our learnings fairly quickly to come to this conclusion. This is only the journey from going to 0 to 100. It's a long path and long journey after that. You can see most companies took several years before they reach 100 million users if you remove the first few in this screenshot. But that's a conversation for another time. If you only take away one thing, it's craft your hypothesis, validate with users, and then build with confidence. And while you do it, use my framework for it.
Awesome. This was really insightful. Thanks for sharing that with this audience. We have a few questions that we've collected from folks, both online and offline, and other people on the call can feel free to add your questions into the chat as well as we do this. But to jump in, I think first of all, like this framework is really nice. It really helps reduce like the clutter that you experience when you want to validate and go to market, and really helps folks to like narrow down on their wedge users, what they're saying, etc. I think the one question that we have related to this is, when we think about like building conviction in the product market fit, do you think that there's a point at which you can with guarantee say that you found this thing called product market fit? Do you completely deny that this concept exists, or is there no set stage and you just continue to build confidence as you continue to add more zeros?
I think finding PMF. I recently read somewhere. I forgot where I read that, but it said something like the process of finding PMF never ends. You start building for a particular audience. You have PMF with them. They become retained and they keep on coming back. And then you add some more use cases. You expand audiences, and suddenly you lost PMF. It's an iterative process that you keep on. It just never stops. Good companies and good products keep on adding more use cases and more like audiences, and you're always working on this process of finding and building PMF. Also, finding PMF in the context of a company like Facebook versus a startup are very different things as well. Right? And that's why I said in the beginning, I don't think there's one way to find PMF. For a company of Facebook, you just need to find PMF with a much bigger audience, and thinking about it from day one is a very different perspective as opposed to a new B2B startup who maybe just cares about building a business out of like 40 users. You find PMF in very different ways and you reach that point in a very different way. But fundamentally, it's about retention. People like your product and they come back and they use it again and again. And there is no stronger indicator of PMF than retention. You know it when you don't have it.
That's an awesome answer. I think the flip side and the hard-hitting question on the other side was like, how do you prepare in the process of idea selection? So I think you walked through a fine example. Maybe you have like 3 or 4 other ideas, right? And just focusing on the wedge users will not tell you about like the size of the market. And so at what point do you really like go broad, validate multiple ideas and like narrow in on one and then focus on your wedge users, right?
Yeah. I think this is more about this is like part art and part science. You can add a framework to this, you can add a system to it that helps you get to conclusions faster, but it's also equal parts art. It's not all science. In the beginning, the example when I talked about the super example, I only talked about one use case and one hypothesis that we started nailing down. We actually started with a list of about 70 hypotheses based on internal data from Instagram, Facebook, general direction the market is heading. And we kept on even at that point when we have 70 hypotheses, there were some forcing functions which allowed us to narrow down some of the problems. We weren't excited to solve some problems were just big enough, or we were just not in a good position to solve certain problems. Like, for example, multi-stream. Like, creators wanted to have one tool where they could stream to all platforms like Twitch and Instagram and Twitter and all these places at the same time. We didn't have any interest in solving that problem. And also, just live streaming video is just inherently a very expensive, like live streaming video to multiple streams at the same time is a very expensive infrastructural problem, which we didn't want to tackle. So there were multiple reasons which allowed us to rule out a bunch of those things. And with the remaining set of like 20, 30 problems, we went and interviewed people and like talked to creators to see what resonated with them the most. We went in with a big list, with an opinion, ruled some of the things that we were not excited about or couldn't solve, and then took a set of ideas that we were excited about, were in a good position to solve, and we thought were meaningful, and conducted interviews till we started to find a problem that resonated with majority of the creators we were talking with. And that's sort of how we narrowed down with like a big list to a single hypothesis.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that process. You touched upon like product market fit and knowing when you don't have it. I guess the flip side of sort of building and adding zeros is at some point you also need to know when to stop. And I think you touched upon how you arrived at that conclusion. What is the advice that you would share for this group as to when they should stop? Like, what is the general pattern to know that your hypothesis was invalidated and or that you should stop iterating in this direction versus like picking another problem and trying to solve it a different way?
I think there's two things to this. I think good hypothesis And problems are, firstly, bad hypotheses are easy to give up because it doesn't resonate with anyone. And people will tell you that this makes no sense and this is not a problem worth solving, or they don't care about it as much. The problem with identifying good problems and hypotheses is it always resonates with some people. You will, if you go, you will, it might not be like, 99% of the people tell you, oh, this is just bang on. This is exactly the problem I've been facing and I want to work on. And this is the problem that I've been facing and I need you to solve this for me. It might not be that high, but it's often like if you figure out a good problem, it will resonate with like some amount of people and it's hard to like give up. Especially when you could start in the beginning. Let's say you were excited about this problem, you did a gut check, you documented everything, and it seemed like a big-ish problem. You moved on to the next step. You started building with 10 users. It really resonated, but then you went to 100 folks and it didn't resonate with them. And now you're back to all the way to one. But it could also have been that you went to the middle step, you started building the solution and it just never resonated. And you kept on iterating and pivoting. And I've seen both sides. There's merit to both sides, where you quickly test and give up, as opposed to like you keep on iterating. When you find a problem that's exciting but you can't land a solution, you quickly keep on iterating till it lands. It honestly, there's like, pros and cons for both sides, but it really depends on what your context is at that moment. Like, do you have that much time, bandwidth, resources to keep on iterating and trying to chase the problem down? Because all problems, again, can't be solved or just can't be solved profitably. Ones that can, you might not be excited about it. It's a function of you being excited about it, you having resources to solve it, and you getting some continuous learning and signal. If the learning plateaus, or if the learning plateaus or your motivation plateaus, that's probably a good signal the way you should stop chasing that problem down. And if you're just not getting more signal, then there's no point in running these tests.
Yeah, that's super insightful. Now, switching gears a little bit to like picking your wedge users. I think you spoke a lot about like finding those first 10 or 20 users that can give you like critical feedback about your product, be very involved in like the product development process. And it's all about like communicating with them, understanding their pain points as well. What is the best way to identify these users? Like, are these the loudest people in the market who want your service? Or is it actually to be very unbiased in your customer selection and sort of go after like a broad base of users that is more representative of like the general market here?
Yeah, this is such a deep topic. This could be an entire conversation in itself. Now, again, like picking a wedge audience in a big company versus picking a wedge audience for a startup or a completely new product, very different problems. When you're in a big company, you have years worth of operational intelligence to build off on. People have talked to so many folks, you have internal insights, data, qual and like quant data that you can build off and have some hypothesis around. Creators are doing XYZ thing on Instagram versus creators are spending their time doing XYZ on Facebook. You have some direction and inclination. But when you're a startup or like you're trying to build a new product, your hunch is, that's why people often say you should chase down problems that you've experienced, because firstly you understand that user, you understand the problem, and you yourself are the user. You can define yourself, as opposed to completely throwing a dart in the dark and then trying to talk to people and figure out. That's a long journey of figuring out who the user is. Generally speaking, I like to define these wedge audiences as someone who's like very comic. It's like a comically narrow, like having an extreme. You should be able to picture exactly who you're talking about. It shouldn't be generic. It shouldn't be a generic representation, because if you're trying to build for too many people, you're building for no one. You need to have exactly a specific user in your head, and you should be able to think about when they are experiencing this problem, what are they thinking about? What problem are they facing? And how can you essentially build for a very, very specific audience or user?
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I think your background also talked about how you've built products in the nonprofit space and helping them to actually get funding. What would you say are the differences when you're doing this at Meta, which is a highly profitable company, versus like areas where you may be more resource strapped, so on and so forth? Would you change your framework in any meaningful way? How would you think about like product development for these two very different universes, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working on it, clearly didn't work out. So, maybe I don't know enough about working on the nonprofit side of things. But for context, when we were building Find a Way, we experimented and iterated a bunch of different things. And the last product that we were trying to build was a subscription offering. It was a monthly subscription program, but you got access to discounts. It was a loyalty program, but you got access to discounts at confectioneries and restaurants. And a part of these funds were donated to education-focused nonprofits to fund their operations. And we were trying to get, we were sharing information about these children whose education was being funded back to these people who are subscribers. So the flywheel was, we have subscribers who pay to get discounts to restaurants, and restaurants get more footfall, so they continue working with us. Nonprofits get money, and these people get goodwill from nonprofits, which helps us retain them and keep on maintaining this cycle. And the whole insight with which we started was, this was back in 2013, where I forgot the exact numbers, but only some percent out of all the capital that was being donated to nonprofits, only some 0.1 or 0.2% of the capital was coming from people, private citizens, or 99% of that capital was coming from companies and corporates. Whereas the difference in the West at that point, the delta was significantly higher. A much larger percentage of the regular population was actually donating money to nonprofits. We were trying to see if we can build a different incentive model. Clearly, it didn't work out. And we realized that people just, I don't know what's a good answer for why it didn't work out. If I would have known why it didn't work out, I would have probably tried to iterate on it. But it was a very different model of building products. So the incentive model we were trying to build was very different. We were trying to sort of merge getting users access to some incentive by giving them the restaurant discounts, and had this commercial aspect of things where people got some ROI on the money they were giving to the system, and also some of this money was trying to go to nonprofits. On the user side of things, it was very similar to how you build regular products. You get them to become a subscriber, you get them to achieve some value, and you try to show them that you're getting them value. On the nonprofit side was super interesting. So they were basically, we went to them and we said, this is what we're building. We get you money and we leverage you to build this flywheel and drive retention on the other side. And they were free money, we're happy to help you out. So there really weren't any challenges on the nonprofit side of things. The primary challenges that we faced were on this restaurant side of things, where people just weren't motivated to purely donate. We started with the crowdfunding platform where not as many people were donating. And we also realized distribution is hard. Getting people to come and donate on your platform is a hard job. And on the flip side, on the nonprofit side, all of them were why not? Sure. You're giving me free money, giving me more distribution, and people are going to donate. So they were more than happy. But clearly, in the end, it did not work out. Yeah, sorry. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I'm not sure what the true differences are.
No, thank you for sharing your journey and sharing, the various challenges and the various cohorts that you were talking to in terms of your customers. I think the next question coming in from chat is about what if you have to scale from the beginning for a large client base? So I guess what that means is if you had a very large client base in mind and you had this framework, probably what this question and my interpretation of what this question is trying to get at is, would you add consideration into your framework to think about I also have to reach this scale is the end goal essentially, and how would you anticipate that and how would you build for that?
It's a question that we are starting with a certain scale already. So we have product market fit with a certain audience, and how do we leverage this?
Yeah.
I think I still do that. Even so I've spent some time on bigger teams on WhatsApp and Instagram as well, where we had hundreds of millions of businesses on the platform. We were trying to build products for them. I set up a very similar operational framework there as well. The only difference was the output and outcome that we were expecting. Right now, the example I gave is a hypothesis around something we're starting from completely zero. You have no insight. You're depending upon scouting the internet, going to Reddit, and just talking to people, cold calling folks. There, the difference was we had a certain set of known problems that we wanted to chase down, and we were trying to solve it with a very similar framework. But the way to test those were very different. We had significantly higher confidence in the problem because you already have a product, you already have data going in, you're very clear on what the problem is. If people are just not coming back, they're not retaining. If people are dropping off the onboarding flow, they're just not being able to onboard. If people are not buying something, you just know they're just not buying something. It's not a problem. You don't have to necessarily go validate like the problem, but you do need to validate the why. So the hypothesis becomes like someone's dropping off the onboarding flow. Why are they dropping off? Are they struggling to onboard? Are they struggling to figure out what the information is? Do they not see the value in doing this? You can use this exact same hypothesis-driven approach in every stage of the product. The only difference is how much confidence you have in the problem and how do you design your tests. It goes from like qualitative to more quantitative means. You can still obviously you should always go talk to people and like talk to folks who are using the product. There is no substitute for that. No amount of SQL query writing gives you as much value as going to just talking to people. But how you design your tests and the context completely changes once you've gone from, going from 100 million to 100.1 million.
Awesome. The next question is around like building an MVP and how do you go about that once you have your set of initial users? How do you launch it? How do you iterate on it? Is there a specific framework or a pattern that you've used at Meta?
Yeah, I think Meta is probably not a good example for if you're trying to build like a new product. I don't know if Meta is actually a good example for that. Meta and Google make hundreds of billions of dollars just by selling distribution. That's in their DNA. They help other people get users. So they inherently are good at getting distribution because they are the distribution source. So that's probably not like a good example of how a new startup can come and like think about distribution. And how do you get distribution? Honestly, again, it depends on whether you're talking about veg users or you're talking about going from 1,000 to 100,000 users. And it also varies a lot based on consumer and for B2B consumer and for depending upon if you're going for businesses or not. For consumers, initially, could be friends or family, could be scouting the internet, going to Reddit. We often ran painted door tests, even at like NPE. We would just create landing pages, run ads for landing pages, or like go post on like Reddit, go find communities where our potential audience might be spending their time. This works better for consumers, not as much if you're trying to seek businesses. If you're trying to see, in the past, when I've tried to validate hypotheses at Yelp and also when I was in like working on business messaging, I would often join communities and Facebook groups of businesses on Facebook or Reddit or like Quora. And there's a bunch of communities where small businesses spend a lot of their time discussing problems and how they're trying to hack online tools. Spending time at these communities and forums, you could pretend to be a business owner, you could share your experience, you can ask questions, you could share your MVP and try to get some distribution for it. When you're trying to get 5 or 10 users versus when you're trying to go from like 10,000 to 20,000 users, very different ballgame. That's why initially, early on, focus on doing things that don't scale. Everyone thinks they're doing things that don't scale, but they're really not. Like you could take it down by like 10 notches.
Awesome. That was super insightful. We have one question, which is, how can we get the link to your framework? And I guess if that's something that you can share in the chat, I can pop it into the Q&A as well and type out an answer for the person asking.
Yeah, how do I share it in the chat? I don't have access to chat on my Zoom.
If
but
not, we can always make it available on the website as well. When we do share out the recording for the video as well.
Okay. I also have this link in the bottom right on my website, my first name, last name.com/HDI. It'll redirect you to the template.
Awesome. And that's all that we have for today. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for walking us through your framework. It was really insightful hearing from you on, how to go from your zero to 100 users and using the framework to effectively do that. With that, I'll hand it off to Emma to close for tonight.
I think you're on mute.
Thank you for catching that. Thank you, Rohan, for the insightful presentation. And thank you, as always, Rishi, for hosting us. For those of you who are still on the call, keep an eye out for your email on Friday. I will be sending out the recording, and I can also include that link so that you all can rewatch and share with colleagues. We'll see you next time.